the Mafia boss who saw her scars. Lena Carter had spent 3 years perfecting the art of invisibility, until the night she walked into the obsidian room covered in bruises and locked eyes with the most dangerous man in the city. Adrian Voss didn't just see her injuries, he saw her. And when his voice cut through the darkness with 4 simple words, "Who did this to you?" everything changed. By morning, her tormentor would vanish. By nightfall, she'd be marked as untouchable. This is the story of a woman who learned that sometimes the most dangerous protection is also the most addictive. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. And if you love stories about women who rise from nothing to everything, hit that like button now. Let's make this story reach every corner of the globe. The Obsidian Room existed in the space between legal and lethal, a members-only club where politicians rubbed shoulders with criminals, where million-dollar deals happened over whiskey that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and where the servers knew better than to remember anything they saw or heard. Lena Carter had worked there for 3 years, and she'd mastered the essential skill, becoming invisible. She moved through the dimly lit space like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the black marble floors, her face a carefully constructed mask of pleasant neutrality. The bruise on her left cheekbone was hidden under a layer of concealer so thick it felt like a second skin. The split lip she'd explained away to her manager as a clumsy stumble in her apartment. The fingerprint bruises circling her wrists were covered by the long sleeves of her black uniform. Nobody looked at the help anyway. Not really. "Whiskey, neat, top shelf, and make it quick." Lena nodded at the businessman in the corner booth, her practiced smile never faltering even as her ribs screamed in protest when she turned. Derek had been particularly angry last night. Something about dinner being late. Or maybe it was that she'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. After 2 years, the reasons all blurred together into one constant truth. Everything was always her fault. She delivered the drink, collected the empty glasses from table 7, refilled the ice bucket at the bar, and checked her watch. 3 more hours. She could survive 3 more hours. She'd survived worse. "Lena." Her manager Marcus appeared at her elbow, his expression tight. "Mr. Voss's table. Now." Her blood went cold. Adrian Voss occupied the corner booth in the VIP section, the area servers only entered when summoned. He was a name whispered with fear, a presence that made hardened criminals look away. In 3 years, Lena had never been called to his table. He had his own dedicated servers, people who'd worked at the Obsidian for a decade and knew how to move through his world without making ripples. "Marcus, I can't." His regular girl called in sick. "You're up." Marcus's hand on her shoulder was firm. "Don't screw this up." "And Lena?" His voice dropped. "Whatever you see, whatever you hear, you remember nothing. Understand?" She understood. She understood that Adrian Voss wasn't just another wealthy patron. He was the patron. The man who owned half the city through a network of legitimate businesses and less than legitimate enforcement. He was the reason the Obsidian Room existed at all, a neutral ground where his associates could meet without fear of interruption or investigation. Lena smoothed her uniform, checked her reflection in the bar mirror, and winced. The concealer on her cheekbone had started to crack, a thin line of purple-black showing through. She pressed powder over it with shaking fingers, took a breath that sent sharp pain through her bruised ribs, and walked toward the VIP section. Adrian Voss's booth was positioned to give him a perfect view of both entrances, his back to the wall, his attention apparently focused on the tablet in front of him. 2 men flanked him, not quite bodyguards, but close enough. The one on the left was built like a tank, his suit stretched across shoulders that looked like they could break a man in half. The one on the right was leaner, his eyes constantly scanning the room with predatory awareness. Lena approached with her gaze lowered, her server's smile fixed in place. "Good evening, Mr. Voss. What can I get for you?" Silence. She waited, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. Had she said something wrong? Used the wrong tone? She'd been briefed on the rules. Speak only when spoken to, never make direct eye contact, deliver what was requested, and disappear. Look at me. The voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried an authority that made her muscles lock. Slowly, Lena raised her eyes. Adrian Voss was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s at most, with dark hair styled in a way that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck and eyes so pale gray they looked almost silver in the club's low lighting. He wore a suit that was clearly custom-made, charcoal fabric that fit him like a second skin, and a watch that could probably pay her rent for a year. But it wasn't his appearance that made her breath catch. It was the way he looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, with an intensity that felt like being pinned under a microscope. Those silver eyes tracked across her face, pausing on her cheekbone, dropping to her mouth, rising to meet her gaze. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, a tension that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "McAllen 25. No ice." His voice remained soft, controlled. "And sit down." Lena's mind went blank. Excuse me?" "Sit." He gestured to the booth seat across from him. "Now." The two men on either side of him didn't move, didn't react, but Lena felt their attention shift to her like the weight of a physical touch. She glanced toward the bar where Marcus was watching, saw him give a nearly imperceptible nod, and slid into the booth on legs that felt like water. Adrian leaned back, his fingers steepled in front of him. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, sir." "And in 3 years, have I ever spoken to you before tonight?" "No, sir." "Then you're wondering why I called you over?" It wasn't a question. "You're wondering what you did wrong, what rule you broke, whether you're about to lose your job." Lena said nothing. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. "You're also wondering," Adrian continued, his gaze never leaving her face, "whether that concealer on your cheek is thick enough, whether I can see the split in your bottom lip, whether I've noticed the way you're holding yourself, like someone who's trying very hard not to show that breathing hurts." The blood drained from Lena's face. "I'm going to ask you a question," Adrian said, his tone still conversational, still soft. "And I want you to understand something before you answer. I already know the truth. This isn't about information. This is about whether you're brave enough to say it out loud." He leaned forward, and the movement brought him close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his irises, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and something underneath it, gunpowder maybe, or just danger. "Who did this to you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and inescapable. Lena's first instinct was to lie, to smile and shake her head and say it was nothing, just a clumsy accident. So embarrassing, really. She was fine. Everything was fine. But something in Adrian Voss's eyes stopped the words before they could form. He'd said he already knew the truth. And looking at him now, at the cold certainty in his expression, she believed him. "I can't." The words came out barely above a whisper. "If I tell you, he'll kill me." "No." Adrian's voice hardened, losing its conversational warmth. "He won't. Because if you give me his name, he won't be alive long enough to touch you again." Lena's breath stuttered. This was insane. She was sitting in a booth with Adrian Voss, one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the city, and he was offering to what? Kill Derek? Make him disappear? "I don't understand," she managed. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Something flickered across Adrian's face, an expression too quick to read, gone before she could identify it. "I've seen you," he said quietly. "Every time I've been here over the past year, I've watched you move through this room like you're trying not to exist. I've seen you flinch when men raise their voices. I've seen you check the exits compulsively. I've seen you survive." He paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. 3 weeks ago, you had a bruise on your jaw. 2 weeks before that, your wrist was bandaged. Last month, you moved like someone who'd been hit in the ribs. And tonight, his gaze traveled over her face again, clinical and thorough. Tonight, you walked in here looking like someone used you as a punching bag, and I'm done watching it happen. Lena couldn't breathe. Someone had noticed. In 3 years of working at the Obsidian, in 2 years of hiding Derek's abuse, in a lifetime of being invisible, someone had actually seen her. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She couldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of Adrian Voss and his stone-faced associates. "His name is Derek Kane," she whispered. He was my boyfriend. I've tried to leave. I've tried so many times, but he always finds me. He says if I ever leave him for real, he'll kill me. And I believe him." Adrian's expression didn't change, but his eyes went absolutely glacial. "Address." "What?" "Give me his address. Where does he live?" Lena's hand started shaking. We share an apartment, 2247 Morrison Street, Unit 4B. "You're not going back there tonight." Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked at the man on his right. "Carter, arrange a hotel room, somewhere nice, put it on my account." "Sir," Lena started. "You're not going back there," Adrian repeated, his voice allowing no argument. "Tonight, you're going to a hotel. Tomorrow, my people will move your belongings out of that apartment, whatever you want to keep. By tomorrow night, Derek Kane will no longer be a problem." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than someone's life, should have terrified her. Maybe it did terrify her. But underneath the fear was something else, something she almost didn't recognize. Hope. "I don't have money for a hotel," Lena said. "I can barely afford my half of the rent. I can't." "You're not paying." Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at her. "The room is booked. Presidential suite at the Meridian. Carter will drive you." "I'm working. My shift doesn't end until—" "Your shift ended the moment you sat down in this booth." Adrian's gaze shifted to somewhere over her shoulder, and Lena turned to see Marcus approaching with her coat and purse. "Marcus understands. Don't you, Marcus?" Her manager nodded quickly, his face carefully neutral. "Of course, Mr. Voss. Lena, take all the time you need. Your position will be waiting when you're ready to return." Lena looked between them, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Men like Adrian Voss didn't notice broken waitresses. They didn't offer protection. They didn't— "Why are you doing this?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "I don't understand. What do you want from me?" Adrian stood buttoning his suit jacket with precise movements. "What do I want?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her with those unsettling silver eyes. "I want you to sleep tonight without wondering if he's going to come home drunk and angry. I want you to wake up tomorrow without checking your body for new bruises. I want you to understand that there are still people in this world who believe you deserve better than what you've been given." He nodded to Carter, who stood and gestured for Lena to follow. "Wait." Lena didn't move, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "What happens to Derek?" Adrian's smile was cold enough to frost glass. "That's not something you need to concern yourself with. Go to the hotel, order room service, take a bath, sleep. By the time you wake up, your problem will be solved. You're going to kill him." It should have been a question, but it came out as a statement. "I'm going to make sure he never hurts you again." Adrian's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained hard. "There's a difference." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say that she couldn't let him do this, that she'd find another way, that she didn't want blood on her hands. But the words died in her throat. Because the truth was, she was tired. She was so desperately, bone-deep tired of being afraid, of hiding bruises, of measuring her words and her movements to avoid triggering Derek's rage. And here was Adrian Voss offering her a way out. Maybe she should have been horrified. Maybe she should have run. But all she felt was a crushing wave of relief so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Adrian's expression shifted, something almost like approval flickering across his features. "Good. Carter will give you his number. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call him. Understood?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. She let Carter guide her out of the VIP section, past the bar where her coworkers watched with wide eyes, through the main floor of the club and out into the cold night air. A black sedan was waiting at the curb, engine running, the driver's face hidden behind tinted windows. Carter opened the back door for her. "The Meridian, ma'am. 30-minute drive. There's water in the center console if you're thirsty." Lena slid into the leather interior, her body finally registering the pain she'd been suppressing for hours. Her ribs throbbed. Her face ached. Her wrists burned where Derek's fingers had dug in. But underneath the pain was something new, the fragile, dangerous feeling of being protected. Oh, the presidential suite at the Meridian was bigger than the apartment she'd shared with Derek. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights glittering like scattered diamonds. The bed was enormous, covered in what had to be 1,000-count sheets. The bathroom had a tub the size of a small pool. Lena stood in the middle of the living area, still wearing her coat, and tried not to cry. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find a hotel employee holding a garment bag and a small suitcase. "Mr. Voss asked us to provide some essentials," the woman said with a professional smile. "Toiletries, sleepwear, a change of clothes for tomorrow. If you need anything else, just dial 0. Lena took the items with numb fingers, closed the door, and finally let herself break down. She cried in the shower, the hot water turning her skin pink, washing away the concealer and the blood and the fear. She cried while ordering room service. Soup and bread, comfort food, things Derek never let her buy because they were too expensive or too fattening. She cried while eating, each bite a small rebellion. And then she climbed into the massive bed, wrapped herself in covers that smelled like lavender and luxury, and slept deeper than she had in 2 years. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of her phone buzzing. Unknown number. Lena answered cautiously. "Hello? Ms. Carter. This is Carter." The voice was professional, clipped. "I'm calling to arrange the retrieval of your belongings. Can you provide a list of items you'd like collected from the Morrison Street apartment?" Reality crashed back. Derek, the apartment, Adrian's promise. "Is he—" Lena's throat closed around the question. Derek Kane is no longer a concern. Carter's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "The apartment is currently unoccupied. We can collect your items this afternoon if you provide a list." Unoccupied. Not, "Derek isn't there," not, "He's at work." Unoccupied, which meant Lena's hands started shaking. "What did you do to him?" A pause. "That's not my information to share, ma'am. If you have questions about Mr. Kane's current status, you'll need to speak with Mr. Voss directly. Now, regarding your belongings?" Lena gave him the list in a daze. Her clothes, her laptop, the photo albums her mother had left her, the few pieces of jewelry that had been her grandmother's. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the shared life she'd built with Derek, she wanted none of it. "I'll have everything delivered to your new residence by evening," Carter said. I don't have a new residence. I can't afford—" "Mr. Voss has arranged an apartment for you. Secure building, doorman, your name on the lease. Details will be sent to your phone within the hour." The call ended before she could protest. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, her phone clutched in her hand, and tried to process what was happening. Less than 12 hours ago, she'd been serving drinks and hiding bruises. Now Derek was no longer a concern, and she had a new apartment she hadn't asked for, paid for by a man she barely knew. She should be terrified. She should be running. Instead, she felt like she was floating, untethered from everything she'd known. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Address 1847, Belmont Avenue, Unit 12A. Key with doorman. Lease in your name, paid for 6 months. Utilities included. No strings attached. AV. No strings attached. Lena stared at the message until her eyes blurred. There had to be strings. There were always strings. Men didn't do things like this without expecting something in return. But what could Adrienne Voss possibly want from her? She had nothing. She was nothing, just a waitress with a GED and a history of terrible choices. Another text. You're safe now. That's all I wanted to give you. Lena's vision swam. She read the message 3 times, 4 times, searching for the hidden meaning, the ulterior motive, the trap. But there was nothing. Just a simple statement. You're safe now. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena believed it. The apartment at 1847 Belmont Avenue was perfect. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, a kitchen with actual counter space. The building had a doorman named George who greeted her with a warm smile and handed her a key card. The elevator was clean and new. The hallways were well lit. Lena stood in the empty living room and cried again, not from pain this time, but from the overwhelming impossibility of it all. Her belongings arrived at 6 p.m., delivered by 2 men who worked with quiet efficiency, setting boxes in the bedroom and her laptop on the kitchen counter. They were gone within 20 minutes, leaving her alone in a space that was entirely, impossibly hers. She spent the evening unpacking, putting her clothes in the closet, setting her grandmother's jewelry box on the dresser, arranging her mother's photo albums on the bookshelf. Every movement felt surreal, like she was playing at being someone else, someone who lived in safe buildings with doormen, someone who didn't flinch at raised voices, someone who had been given a second chance. At 10 p.m., her phone rang. Adrienne Voss. Lena stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Are you settled? His voice was different on the phone, warmer somehow, less formal. Yes, thank you. For everything. I don't know how to... You don't need to thank me. A pause. How are you feeling? The question caught her off guard. Not, how's the apartment, or is everything satisfactory? But how was she feeling? Confused, Lena admitted. This doesn't feel real, any of it. It's real. Adrienne's tone was firm, certain. You're safe. You have a home. You don't have to be afraid anymore. What happened to Derek? The question came out before she could stop it. Silence. Then, he's alive, if that's what you're asking, but he's no longer in the city. He won't be coming back. He's somewhere he can think about his choices. Adrienne's voice hardened slightly. Somewhere he can learn what it feels like to be powerless. He won't hurt you again, Lena. He won't hurt anyone again. Lena should have asked more questions, should have demanded details, coordinates, proof of life. But she didn't. Because somewhere deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she didn't care what had happened to Derek. She only cared that he was gone. Are you going back to the Obsidian? Adrienne asked, changing the subject. I don't know. I need to work. I need money for... The apartment is paid for 6 months. That gives you time to figure out what you want to do. If you want to go back to the club, Marcus has your position waiting. If you want to do something else... He paused. I have connections. I can help. There it was. The string she'd been waiting for. What do you want from me? Lena asked quietly. For all of this, the apartment, the protection, making Derek disappear, what do you expect in return? Adrienne was silent for so long she thought he might have hung up. Then, I expect you to live, to sleep without nightmares, to walk down the street without looking over your shoulder. That's what I expect. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. His voice softened. I don't want anything from you, Lena. I'm not Derek. I'm not going to demand payment or gratitude or... He stopped abruptly. I saw someone who needed help and I helped. That's all. People like you don't do things without reason. Then maybe I'm not like other people. A hint of dark humor entered his tone. Sleep, Lena. Tomorrow, decide what you want. The world is open to you now. He ended the call before she could respond. Lena stood in her new apartment, surrounded by her unpacked belongings, and wondered what kind of man offered salvation without demanding worship in return. She returned to the Obsidian Room 3 days later, not because she needed the money. The cash Adrian had arranged to be left with the doorman would cover groceries for a month, but because she needed to feel normal. She needed to prove to herself that she could go back, that Derek hadn't taken everything from her. The moment she walked through the employee entrance, she knew something had changed. Her coworkers stared, whispered. Melissa, who'd worked the bar for 5 years and barely acknowledged Lena's existence, actually smiled and said, "Welcome back." Marcus called her into his office before her shift started. "I need to make something clear," he said, closing the door. "What happened between you and Mr. Voss is your business, but it's changed things here. Do you understand?" Lena shook her head slowly. Marcus sighed. "You're protected now. Everyone knows it. The clients, the staff, even the owner. Adrian Voss doesn't extend his protection lightly, and when he does..." He met her eyes. "People respect it, which means if anyone here gives you trouble, they'll answer to him." The weight of it settled over Lena like a physical thing, protected, marked, claimed, in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with power. "I don't want special treatment," she said. "Too late." Marcus wasn't unkind, just realistic. "You're working the VIP section now. Better tips, better clients. And Lena? If anyone, and I mean anyone, makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Understood?" She understood. She understood that Adrian Voss had rewritten the rules of her entire world. Her first shift back was surreal. Men who'd barely glanced at her before nodded respectfully when she passed. Regular clients who'd been handsy in the past kept their distance. The servers who'd once treated her like furniture now included her in their break room conversations. And in the corner booth of the VIP section, Adrian Voss sat with his tablet and his associates, his silver eyes tracking her movement across the room with an intensity that made her skin prickle. When she brought him his Macallan 25, he didn't ask her to sit, didn't speak, just took the glass, their fingers brushing briefly, and gave her a small nod. But in that moment of contact, in the warmth of his fingers against hers, Lena felt something shift. Recognition. Connection. The acknowledgement of a debt that could never be repaid, and didn't need to be. She went back to work, moving through the Obsidian Room with a confidence she hadn't possessed before. The bruises on her face were fading, her ribs had healed, and for the first time in her life, Lena Carter was no longer invisible. The question was, what came next? The following weeks passed in a strange, suspended rhythm that felt like living someone else's life. Lena worked her shifts at the Obsidian, collected tips that were suddenly 3 times what she'd made before, and returned each night to an apartment that still didn't quite feel real. She bought groceries without checking prices. She took long baths without timing herself to conserve hot water. She slept through entire nights without jolting awake at phantom sounds. But freedom, she was learning, came with its own complicated weight. Adrian continued to occupy his corner booth 3 nights a week, always with the same associates, always conducting business in low voices that never quite carried to where she stood. He never asked her to sit again, never called her over for anything beyond his drink order. Their only contact was the brief moment when she delivered his Macallan, when their fingers would brush and his eyes would search her face, checking, she realized, for signs of new bruises, new fear, new damage. He was always checking. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being seen by the only person who'd ever bothered to look. 3 weeks after Derek's disappearance, Lena was restocking glasses behind the bar when Marcus appeared at her elbow, his expression carefully neutral in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. VIP section, Mr. Voss wants to see you. Her stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong? No. Marcus's voice was quieter than usual. But there's someone with him, someone asking about you. The walk to the VIP section felt like moving through water. Lena's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Police, detectives, someone who knew what had happened to Derek and wanted answers she didn't have. But when she reached Adrian's booth, the person sitting across from him wasn't a cop. It was a woman. She was probably in her mid-50s, expensively dressed in a way that screamed old money, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the same pale gray as Adrian's. The family resemblance was unmistakable. Ms. Carter. Adrian's voice was formal, his posture rigid in a way Lena had never seen before. This is my mother, Catherine Voss. She wanted to meet you. Catherine Voss looked Lena up and down with the kind of clinical assessment usually reserved for livestock auctions. So you're the waitress my son has decided to adopt as his latest charity case. The words were delivered with such casual cruelty that Lena actually flinched. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I'm not a charity case, Lena said quietly, finding her voice. I work for a living. Of course you do, dear. Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. And I'm sure you're very good at serving drinks and looking helpless. It's quite effective, isn't it? Bruise yourself up, catch my son's attention, and suddenly you're living in a luxury apartment on his dime. Mother, Adrian's voice was low, dangerous. Oh, don't mother me, Adrian. This isn't the first time you've let your savior complex override your common sense. Catherine turned back to Lena. How much do you want? Lena blinked. Excuse me? To disappear. To move to another city and stop being a complication in my son's life. Name your price. The air in the booth went absolutely glacial. Adrian stood slowly, his movements controlled but radiating barely contained fury. Get out. Catherine didn't move. I'm trying to protect you. I said get out. Adrian's voice could have cut glass. Now. For a moment, mother and son stared at each other in a silent battle of wills that made Lena want to disappear into the floor. Then Catherine stood gracefully, smoothed her designer skirt, and gave Lena one final dismissive look. When you inevitably hurt him, she said softly, remember that I offered you an exit. She turned to Adrian. And when she shows her true colors, don't come crying to me. She swept out of the VIP section with the bearing of a woman who'd never been told no in her life. The silence she left behind was suffocating. Lena stood frozen, her face burning, her hands trembling. I should go. Sit. Adrian's tone brooked no argument. She sat. He remained standing for a long moment, his hands braced on the table, his head bowed. When he finally looked up, his expression was carefully blank, but his eyes were still storm cloud gray. I apologize, he said. That was inappropriate and unacceptable. My mother has no right to speak to you that way. She thinks I'm using you. Lena's voice came out smaller than she intended. She thinks everyone is using everyone. It's how she sees the world. Adrian sat back down, his movements precise. She's wrong about you. How do you know? The question escaped before Lena could stop it. You barely know me. We've had one real conversation. For all you know, she's right. For all you know, I am just... Stop. Adrian leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers. I've spent my entire life reading people. It's how I survive in my world. And I know the difference between someone who's manipulating me and someone who's just trying to survive. But why? Lena heard the desperation in her own voice. Why do you care? Why does it matter to you what happens to me? Adrian was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming once against the table in what might have been agitation. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. When I was 12, my father took me to one of his business meetings, a negotiation with a rival family. The details don't matter, but there was a woman there, a server like you. She was maybe 20 and she had bruises on her arms that she kept trying to hide. He paused, his jaw working. The man she worked for backhanded her in front of everyone because she spilled a drink, and my father just laughed, said she probably deserved it for being clumsy. Lena's breath caught. I watched her clean up broken glass with shaking hands, Adrian continued, his eyes distant. I watched her apologize for existing, and I watched every man in that room look right through her like she was nothing. His gaze refocused on Lena, sharp and intense. I swore that day that I would never be like them, that if I ever had power, I would use it to protect people like her, people like you. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way that made Lena's chest ache. I'm not a damsel in distress, she said softly. I don't need saving. No, Adrian agreed. You need someone to level the playing field so you can save yourself. There's a difference. Before Lena could respond, Carter appeared at the booth, leaning down to murmur something in Adrian's ear. Whatever he said made Adrian's expression harden. Excuse me, he said to Lena, standing abruptly. There's something I need to handle. We'll talk later. He was gone before she could ask what was wrong, Carter and the other associate following in his wake like shadows. Lena sat alone in the booth for a moment, her mind reeling from everything that had just happened, before making her way back to the bar on unsteady legs. Melissa caught her arm as she passed. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Adrian's mother was here, Lena said numbly. Oh, shit. Melissa's eyes widened. Catherine the Ice Queen herself? What did she want? To pay me to disappear, apparently. Classic. Melissa shook her head. She did the same thing to Adrian's last girlfriend, offered her $500,000 to leave town and never contact him again. Lena's head snapped up. What? Yeah, Sophia something. She was a law student, I think. Catherine didn't approve, not connected enough, not wealthy enough, whatever. The girl took the money and ran. Melissa shrugged. Can't say I blame her. $500,000 would solve a lot of problems. I didn't take it, Lena said. I know. You're still here, aren't you? Melissa's expression softened. Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Adrian, but for what it's worth, I've worked here for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He doesn't look at me any particular way, Lena protested weakly. Melissa just laughed. Honey, he tracks your movement across this room like you're the only person in it. Everyone's noticed. Why do you think you're suddenly getting respect from clients who used to treat you like furniture? Because Adrian had marked her as protected. Because he'd rewritten the rules of her world with 4 simple words. Who did this to you? The rest of Lena's shift passed in a blur. She delivered drinks, collected tips, and tried not to think about Adrian's confession or his mother's cold assessment, or the way her entire life had been upended by a man she barely knew, but who somehow saw straight through to her core. When her shift ended at 2 a.m., she found Carter waiting by the employee entrance. Miss Carter, Mr. Voss asked me to drive you home. That's not necessary. It wasn't a request. Carter's expression was professionally neutral, but his tone left no room for argument. Lena followed him to the same black sedan that had taken her to the Meridian, settling into the leather interior with a sigh. The city passed by the tinted windows in streaks of light and shadow. They were halfway to her apartment when Carter spoke. He doesn't let people in easily, he said, his eyes on the road. Mr. Voss, most people see the power and the money and think that's all there is. But he's... Carter paused, choosing his words carefully. He's a good man in a business that doesn't reward goodness. It makes him vulnerable sometimes. Why are you telling me this? Lena asked. Because his mother was right about one thing. Carter glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You could hurt him, not financially or professionally. He's untouchable there. But personally, you could destroy him. And he'd let you, because for some reason, he's decided you're worth the risk. The weight of that statement settled over Lena like a physical thing. I don't want to hurt him. Then don't. Carter pulled up in front of her building. But understand that by accepting his protection, by staying in his orbit, you've already become important to him. What you do with that is up to you. Lena climbed out of the car in a daze, nodded to George the doorman, and rode the elevator up to her floor in silence. Her apartment was dark and quiet, exactly as she'd left it. She dropped her purse on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and was about to change into pajamas when someone knocked on her door at 3 a.m. Every instinct screamed at her not to answer, but when she looked through the peephole, she saw Adrian standing in the hallway, still in his suit, looking tired in a way she'd never seen before. She opened the door. What are you doing here? I need to tell you something. Adrian's voice was rough, like he'd been arguing. And it can't wait. Lena stepped back, letting him in. He moved into her small living room, his presence somehow making the space feel even smaller, more intimate. For a long moment he just stood there, his back to her, his shoulders tense. Derek Kane's brother came to see me tonight, he said finally. Marcus Kane. He wants revenge for what happened to Derek. Lena's blood went cold. What happened to Derek? Adrian turned to face her, and the expression on his face was harder than she'd ever seen it. He's alive. I told you that. But let's just say he's not in any position to come after you. His brother, however, is a different story. What did you do to him? Lena whispered. What I had to do. Adrian's jaw was tight. What I would do again in a heartbeat. Derek Kane spent 2 years using you as a punching bag. He threatened to kill you if you left. He made you invisible in your own life. His voice hardened. So I made him understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be afraid, to beg for mercy and receive none. Lena sank onto the couch, her legs giving out. You tortured him. I taught him a lesson. Adrian moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. And then I made sure he understood that if he ever came near you again, the lesson would be permanent. His brother wants retaliation. He wants to hurt me by hurting you. Fear spiked through Lena's chest, sharp and familiar. So what happens now? Do I run? Do I hide? Do I go back to vet? No. Adrian's hand covered hers, warm and solid. You don't run. You don't hide. You stay exactly where you are, and I make sure Marcus Kane understands that touching you would be the last mistake he ever makes. You can't protect me forever, Lena said, hearing the tremor in her own voice. Watch me. There was no arrogance in Adrian's tone, just absolute certainty. Marcus Kane is a mid-level enforcer with delusions of importance. He's not stupid enough to actually come after you. He just wants me to think he might. It's posturing, ego, and I'm going to handle it. How? Adrian's smile was cold. By reminding him why people fear the Voss name. He stood, and for a moment Lena thought he was going to leave, but instead he sat down on the couch beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. I want to show you something, he said, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to her. It was a photo of a young man, maybe 25, with sandy hair and Derek's same cold eyes. Marcus Kane, presumably. But that wasn't what made Lena's breath catch. It was the location tag on the photo. St. Vincent's Rehabilitation Center, 200 miles upstate. Derek's there, Adrian said quietly, in the addiction recovery program, court-ordered, after he was arrested for possession with intent to distribute. He'll be there for 18 months minimum, possibly longer depending on his behavior. Lena stared at the image. You planted drugs on him. I made sure his existing habits were properly documented and reported to the authorities. Adrian's tone was matter of fact. Derek Kane was already using and dealing. I just accelerated the consequences. And while he's upstate learning to be a functioning member of society, he's also learning what happens when you put your hands on someone under my protection. Does he know? Lena asked. Does he know you're the reason he's there? He knows. Adrian's expression darkened. And he knows that if he ever says your name again, if he ever even thinks about you, the next facility he visits will be significantly less pleasant than a rehab center. Lena should have been horrified. She should have been disgusted by the casual way Adrian wielded his power, bending the law and breaking people to his will. But all she felt was a crushing sense of relief that Derek was gone, really gone, locked away somewhere he couldn't hurt her. Your mother thinks I'm using you, she said quietly, that I'm just another person trying to take advantage of your guilt or your money or whatever. Is she right? Am I using you? Adrian took his phone back, sliding it into his pocket. Are you? I don't know. The honesty escaped before Lena could filter it. I don't know how to separate gratitude from whatever this is. You saved me. You gave me an apartment and safety and a life I couldn't have built on my own. How am I supposed to know if what I feel is real or just Stockholm Syndrome with better furniture? Stockholm Syndrome requires you to be held captive, Adrian pointed out. You're free to leave any time. The apartment is in your name. I'm not stopping you from walking away. But would you let me? Lena turned to face him fully. If I said right now that I wanted nothing to do with you, that I wanted to move to another city and start over, would you actually let me go? Adrian held her gaze, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something uncertain flicker across his features. Yes, he said finally. If that's what you wanted, I would let you go. I'd make sure you were safe, make sure you had resources to start over, and then I'd walk away. Because what I want doesn't matter if it's not what you want. What do you want? The question came out barely above a whisper. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair back from her face. His fingers lingered near her cheek, not quite touching, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. I want you to have choices, he said softly. I want you to wake up every morning and decide what you want to do with your day, not what you have to do to survive. I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and see someone strong and capable, not someone broken. He paused, his thumb grazing her jawline. And I want you to choose to stay, not because you owe me or fear me or need me, but because you want to. Lena's breath hitched. And if I do stay, what happens then? Then we figure it out together. Adrian's hand dropped back to his side, but his eyes never left hers. No pressure, no expectations, just see where this goes. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath the carefully maintained control, made something crack open in Lena's chest. This man, this dangerous, powerful man who made people disappear and bent the city to his will, was offering her something she'd never had. A choice. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of you, of this, of everything changing so fast I can't keep up. Fear is reasonable, Adrian said. I'm not exactly a safe bet. No, Lena agreed. You're really not. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Then Lena made a decision. I'm staying, she said. Not because I owe you or because I'm afraid of what happens if I leave, but because for the first time in my life, I want to see what happens next. And I want to see it with you. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Relief, maybe, or hope, or something too complicated to name. Okay, he said simply. Okay, Lena echoed. Adrian stood, and this time he did move toward the door. But before he left, he turned back. Carter will be outside tonight. Just a precaution until I deal with Marcus Kane. He'll be gone by morning, and you'll never know he was there. Adrian, let me do this, he said quietly. Let me make sure you're safe. Everything else we can figure out as we go, but your safety is non-negotiable." Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, she locked the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Through the peephole, she could see Carter settling into a chair at the end of the hallway, a laptop open on his knees, his posture alert but relaxed. She was being protected by a man who'd destroyed her abuser and was preparing to destroy anyone else who threatened her. She was living in an apartment paid for with money earned through means she didn't want to examine too closely. She was working at a club where criminals conducted business, and her safety was guaranteed by fear of the man who owned her loyalty. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was messy and complicated and morally gray in ways that should have terrified her. But as Lena climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin, she realized she wasn't terrified. She was alive, truly, fully alive for the first time in years, and that was worth whatever came next. The following evening, Lena arrived at the Obsidian to find the atmosphere different, charged somehow, like the air before a thunderstorm. The other servers moved with quick efficiency, their voices hushed. Marcus, the manager, looked pale and tense. "What's going on?" Lena asked Melissa at the bar. "Marcus Kane showed up an hour ago," Melissa whispered. "Demanded to see Adrian. They're in the private office now." Lena's stomach dropped. "Marcus Kane is here? Now?" Walked right in like he owned the place. Melissa's eyes were wide. Security tried to stop him, but he said he was here for a business meeting. Adrian took him to the back office 20 minutes ago. Nobody's heard anything since. Lena's hands started shaking. She set down the tray she'd been holding before she dropped it. You need to stay right here," Melissa said firmly, gripping her arm. "Whatever's happening in that office, it's not your fight. Adrian can handle himself." But Lena couldn't just stand there. She moved through the main floor toward the private offices in the back, her heart hammering. The hallway was empty except for Carter, who stood outside a closed door like a sentinel. "Miss Carter." His voice was carefully neutral. "You shouldn't be here." "What's happening?" Lena demanded. "Is Adrian okay?" "Mr. Voss is handling a business matter. I'm sure he'll speak with you when he's finished." "Carter, please." The office door opened. Adrian emerged first, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. There was blood on his knuckles. Not much, just a thin line across his right hand. His face was calm, almost expressionless, but his eyes were ice. Behind him came Marcus Kane, and Lena's breath stopped. The man was bigger than Derek, broader, with the kind of build that came from years of enforcing through violence. But he moved stiffly, one hand pressed to his ribs, his lips split and already swelling. When he saw Lena, his eyes narrowed with pure hatred. "That's her?" he spat. "That's the bitch who got my brother locked up?" Adrian moved faster than Lena would have thought possible. One moment he was standing in the doorway. The next, his hand was wrapped around Marcus Kane's throat, slamming him back against the wall with enough force to make the man's head bounce. "Speak about her again," Adrian said softly, his voice deadly calm. "And I will remove your tongue. Do you understand me?" Marcus Kane's face was turning purple, but he managed a jerky nod. Adrian held him there for another moment, then released him abruptly. Marcus stumbled, gasping, one hand going to his throat. "You came here for answers," Adrian said, his tone conversational now, like they were discussing the weather. "I'm going to give them to you. Your brother put his hands on someone under my protection. He threatened to kill her. He spent 2 years turning her into a ghost, so I made sure he understood the consequences of his actions." "You destroyed him," Marcus rasped. "No, I taught him. There's a difference." Adrian straightened his cuffs, his movements precise. "And now I'm going to teach you. You wanted revenge? You wanted to hurt me by going after her?" He gestured to Lena without looking away from Marcus. "Here's what happens if you try. First, I dismantle your operation piece by piece. Every connection you have, every source of income, every safe house, gone. Second, I make sure every family in this city knows you're untouchable. Not out of respect, out of fear of what associating with you will cost them. Third, his voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. I do to you exactly what I did to your brother, only I don't stop. I don't send you to rehab. I don't give you a chance to recover. Do you understand? Marcus Kane said nothing, his jaw working with impotent rage. I need to hear you say it, Adrian said. I understand. The words came out strangled. Good. Now get the fuck out of my club. Marcus Kane didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled toward the exit, Carter following at a distance to make sure he actually left. The moment he was gone, Adrian's shoulders dropped fractionally, and he finally looked at Lena. You shouldn't have come back here, he said quietly. Are you hurt? Lena stepped closer, reaching for his bloodied hand. It's nothing. But he let her take his hand, let her examine the split knuckles with gentle fingers. You hit him. He came into my club and threatened you. Adrian's voice was flat. I was actually quite restrained, all things considered. Lena looked up at him. At this man who'd just casually destroyed another person's entire world with nothing but words and the promise of violence. She should be terrified, should be running, should be recognizing all the red flags waving frantically in front of her face. Instead, she felt safe. Thank you, she whispered. Adrian's expression softened fractionally. You don't need to thank me for protecting you. It's not... He stopped, seeming to search for words. It's not transactional. It's just what I do. Because of the woman you saw when you were 12. Because of her. Because of you. Because I'm tired of watching people with power use it to hurt people without it. He pulled his hand gently from her grasp. You should get back to work before Marcus starts asking questions. I need to clean this up and make some calls. But before Lena could leave, Adrian caught her wrist. Not hard, not restricting, just enough to stop her. Lena, I need you to understand something. This, he gestured vaguely between them. This isn't going to be easy. There will be more Marcus Kanes, more people who see you as a weakness they can exploit, more nights like this. If that's not what you want, I'm staying, Lena said firmly. We already had this conversation, remember? Adrian's thumb brushed across her pulse point, and she wondered if he could feel how fast her heart was racing. Okay, he said finally. Okay. He let her go, and Lena walked back to the main floor on unsteady legs. She finished her shift in a daze, serving drinks and collecting tips and trying not to think about the blood on Adrian's knuckles or the cold promise in his voice when he'd threatened Marcus Kane. When the night finally ended, Carter drove her home again. As they pulled up to her building, he spoke without turning around. Marcus Kane left the city tonight, took the last train to Chicago with a one-way ticket. He won't be back. Lena absorbed this. Did Adrian... Mr. Voss made it clear that remaining in the city would be detrimental to Mr. Kane's continued health and livelihood. He made the rational choice. Carter's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. You're safe now. For real this time. Safe. Protected. Claimed. Lena climbed out of the car and rode the elevator up to her floor, unlocked her apartment, and stood in the middle of her living room trying to process everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. Adrian's mother thought she was a gold digger. Marcus Kane thought she'd destroyed his brother. Adrian's associates watched her like she was a bomb waiting to explode in their boss's carefully controlled world. But Adrian himself looked at her like she was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth rewriting the rules. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe it too. The shift in how people treated Lena became impossible to ignore over the following month. At the Obsidian, regular clients who'd once looked straight through her now nodded respectfully when she passed their tables. The kitchen staff saved her the best cuts when she ordered the staff meal. Even the owner, a reclusive man named Vincent who rarely appeared on the floor, stopped her one evening to say that her work was exemplary, and if she ever needed anything, his door was open. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. But it was the change outside the club that truly made Lena understand the scope of Adrian's influence. The landlord of her old apartment building called to say that her security deposit, which Derek had claimed didn't exist, was being returned with interest. The medical bills from the emergency room visit after Derek had broken her ribs mysteriously vanished from the collections agency. Even her old bank account, which Derek had drained before she left, suddenly showed a deposit of exactly what had been stolen, plus a formal apology from the bank manager for the administrative error. Adrian denied involvement every time she asked, but his slight smile told her everything she needed to know. They fell into a rhythm over those weeks. Adrian came to the Obsidian 3 nights a week, always taking his corner booth, always ordering the same drink. Sometimes they'd talk when she brought his Macallan, brief conversations about books she was reading or restaurants she wanted to try or the progress she was making in the online business courses she'd started taking. Other times he'd simply watch her work, his silver eyes tracking her movement across the room with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every gesture, every step. On the nights he wasn't at the club, he'd text her. Simple messages, nothing invasive. Did you eat today? Or, the bookstore on 5th has the novel you mentioned in stock, or sometimes just sleep well. The text came at odd hours. 2 in the morning, dawn, mid-afternoon, like he thought of her at random moments and couldn't help reaching out. Lena found herself looking forward to those messages more than she wanted to admit. 6 weeks after Marcus Kane fled the city, Adrian invited her to dinner. Not at the Obsidian, not in some neutral territory, but at his penthouse apartment overlooking the city. The invitation came via text at 10 in the morning on her day off. Dinner tonight? My place. 8 p.m. Carter will pick you up at 7:45. Lena stared at her phone for a full minute before responding. Is this a date? The reply came quickly. Do you want it to be? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it. The moment where she either stepped fully into whatever was building between them or maintained the careful distance she'd been clinging to. The moment where she acknowledged that what she felt for Adrian Voss had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way her heart raced when he looked at her. Yes, she typed, and hit send before she could second-guess herself. Adrian's response was a single word, good. Lena spent the rest of the day in a state of controlled panic. She tried on every piece of clothing she owned twice, finally settling on a simple black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. She did her makeup 3 times. She paced her apartment until George the doorman called up to ask if everything was okay because he could hear her footsteps through the ceiling. When Carter arrived at exactly 7:45, Lena was ready, but nowhere near calm. The drive across the city took 30 minutes, winding through increasingly upscale neighborhoods until they reached a gleaming high-rise that looked like it cost more than some small countries. Carter pulled into an underground garage, parked in a spot marked VOSS, and led Lena to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. Top floor, he said, handing her the card. Mr. Voss is expecting you. The elevator rose in smooth silence, and Lana watched the floor numbers climb with mounting anxiety. What was she doing? This was Adrian Voss, a man who made people disappear, who owned half the city, who destroyed her abuser without breaking a sweat. And she was going to his home for dinner like this was normal, like they were normal. The elevator doors opened directly into Adrian's penthouse, and Lena's breath caught. The space was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights, modern furniture in shades of gray and black, original artwork on the walls that probably cost more than her car. But what struck her most was how lived in it felt. Books were stacked on the coffee table. A laptop sat open on the kitchen island. A jacket was draped over the back of a chair. This wasn't a showpiece. This was a home. You're early, Adrian said, emerging from what looked like the kitchen. He'd changed from his usual suit into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look even more silver. His feet were bare. Something about seeing Adrian Voss barefoot made Lena's chest tighten. "Carter's very punctual," she managed. "He is." Adrian moved closer, and Lena caught the scent of garlic and herbs. "I hope you like Italian. I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage pasta. You're cooking?" The surprise must have shown on her face because Adrian smiled, a real smile, not the cold, controlled expression he wore at the club. "I do occasionally feed myself," he said. "Come on, you can keep me company while I finish." The kitchen was all marble and stainless steel, with pots simmering on the stove and fresh pasta laid out on a cutting board. Adrian moved through the space with easy competence, and Lena found herself mesmerized by the simple domesticity of it. This was Adrian Voss making carbonara, tasting the sauce from a wooden spoon, swearing softly when he splashed water on his sweater. "Wine?" he asked, gesturing to an open bottle of red on the counter. "Please." He poured 2 glasses, handed her one, and went back to stirring the pasta. For a moment they existed in comfortable silence, the only sounds the bubbling of water and the clink of utensils against cookware. "This is strange," Lena said finally. Adrian glanced at her. "Strange how?" "I've seen you threaten to remove someone's tongue. I've watched you make grown men look away in fear. And now you're—" She gestured helplessly at the stove. "You're making me dinner. Would you prefer I threaten you instead?" There was amusement in his voice. "No, I just—" Lena took a sip of wine, trying to organize her thoughts. "I don't know how to reconcile the 2 versions of you. The one who runs an empire built on fear, and the one who checks if I've eaten." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his attention seemingly focused on draining the pasta. Then he said, "They're not different versions. They're the same person doing what needs to be done in different contexts." He plated the food with careful precision. "At the club, I'm the man people fear because fear keeps them in line. Here, with you, I'm just Adrian, a man who wants to cook you dinner and hear about your day." "But you're never just Adrian," Lena said softly. "Even here, even now, you're still the most dangerous person I've ever met." He carried both plates to the dining table, which was already set with actual cloth napkins and real silverware. "Does that frighten you?" Lena sat down across from him, the city lights glittering behind his shoulders like a backdrop of fallen stars. "It should," she admitted. "But no. What frightens me is how much I'm starting to depend on it. On you." Adrian's hand stilled halfway to his wine glass. "Dependence isn't what I want from you." "Then what do you want?" It was the same question she'd asked weeks ago, but this time she needed a different answer. Adrian set down his fork, his gaze intense enough to make her feel pinned in place. "I want you to choose me because being with me makes you happy, not because you need protection or security or any of the things I can provide. I want—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "I want to matter to you the way you matter to me." The confession hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest in a way that made Lena's heart ache. She'd spent weeks trying to convince herself that what she felt for Adrian was just gratitude dressed up as attraction, just trauma bonding with better lighting. But sitting here, watching him look at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. "You do matter to me," she said quietly. "That's what scares me. I barely know you, Adrian. 6 weeks ago, you were just a name people whispered with fear, and now you're—" She gestured between them. "You're this. And I don't know if what I feel is real, or if I'm just—" "Lena." Adrian reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'm not asking you to have everything figured out. I'm just asking you to give this a chance, to see where it goes without overthinking it." "I'm good at overthinking," Lena said, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I've noticed." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Eat your dinner, then we can overthink together." The pasta was perfect, creamy and rich, with just the right amount of pepper. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the tension easing into something warmer, more natural. Adrian asked about the business courses she was taking, and Lena found herself talking about her dream of maybe running her own business someday, something small but hers. "What kind of business?" Adrian asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe event planning, or cafe, or—" She shook her head. "It's stupid. I don't have the capital or the experience or—" "It's not stupid." Adrian's voice was firm. "And capital can be arranged. Experience can be gained. If you want to build something, I can help make that happen." "I don't want your money," Lena said quickly. "I'm not offering money. I'm offering connections, advice, resources. But the work would be yours. The business would be yours. He paused. "I'd just like to watch you build something, to see you create instead of just survive." The sincerity in his voice made Lena's throat tight. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Adrian stood, collecting their empty plates and carrying them to the kitchen. For a moment, Lena thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he spoke without turning around. "When I was 16, I watched my father beat a man to death in our basement. The man had stolen from him. Nothing major, just a few $1,000s. But my father said it was about respect, about making sure everyone knew what happened when you crossed the Voss family." Adrian's shoulders were rigid, his hands braced against the counter. "He made me watch, said I needed to learn what power looked like." Lena's breath caught. "I learned something that day," Adrian continued, his voice hollow. "I learned that power without purpose is just cruelty. That fear without respect is tyranny. And I swore I would never be like him." He finally turned to face her. "When I took over the family business, I changed things. Violence became a last resort instead of a first response. Protection became real instead of just an excuse for extortion. And I started looking for people who needed help instead of people I could exploit." He moved back to the table, but instead of sitting, he leaned against the edge, his arms crossed over his chest in a gesture that looked almost defensive. "You want to know why I care about you, Lena? Because when I saw you that night, bruised and broken and still trying to smile like everything was fine, I saw myself at 16, powerless, trapped, surviving instead of living. And I thought, if I can't save that kid I used to be, maybe I can save her." Lena stood slowly, her legs unsteady. She crossed the small distance between them until she was close enough to see the muscle working in Adrian's jaw, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. "I'm not a redemption project," she said softly. "I know. And I'm not going to fix whatever's broken in you. I know that too." Adrian's hands uncrossed, falling to his sides. "But maybe we can be broken together. Maybe that's enough." Lena reached up, her fingers brushing against his cheek. He went absolutely still, his breath catching, his eyes searching hers for something she wasn't sure she could name. "I'm terrified of you," she whispered. "Of this. Of how much I want it, even though I know it's probably a terrible idea." "It probably is," Adrian agreed. His hand came up to cover hers, holding it against his face. "I'm not a good man, Lena. I've done things that would horrify you. I'll probably do more. And being with me means living in my world, with all the danger and darkness that comes with it." "I know. And you're still here." "I'm still here," Lena confirmed. Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a wall coming down, a carefully maintained distance dissolving. He turned his head slightly, pressing his lips to her palm in a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Stay the night," he said quietly. I'm not asking for anything except your company. Stay. Talk to me. Let me know you better." Lena should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept distance, protected herself from falling too deep too fast. But when she looked at Adrian Voss, this dangerous, complicated man who'd rebuilt her life with nothing but his will and his resources, all she wanted was to say yes. "Okay," she whispered. They moved to the living room, settling on the couch with fresh glasses of wine and the city lights painting shadows across the walls. Adrian asked her about her childhood, and Lena found herself talking about her mother, a woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, who died when Lena was 20 and left her adrift in a world that suddenly felt too big and too cruel. "That's when I met Derek," she said, curled into the corner of the couch with her legs tucked under her. 6 months after she died. I was working at a diner, barely making rent, and he came in and was charming and attentive and made me feel like I mattered. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already trapped. Adrian listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he said simply, "Your mother would be proud of you, of who you're becoming." "How do you know?" Lena asked. "You never met her." "Because any mother who fought that hard to protect her daughter would want to see her thriving, not just surviving. And that's what you're doing now. You're learning, growing, building a future. That's not because of me. That's because of her foundation and your strength." The words settled over Lena like a warm blanket. She'd spent so long feeling like she'd failed her mother's memory by ending up with Derek, by becoming so small and afraid. But maybe Adrian was right. Maybe the fact that she'd survived, that she'd accepted help, that she was trying to build something better, maybe that was enough. "Tell me about your mother," she said. "Catherine the Ice Queen." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "Accurate description. My mother married my father for power and status. They had me because heirs are expected in families like ours." "But love?" He shook his head. "I don't think she's capable of it. Everything is transactional with her. Every relationship is a negotiation." "Is that why you're different?" Lena asked. "Why you care about things like justice and protection instead of just profit?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just rebelling against what I was raised to be." Adrian stared out at the city lights. "My father wanted to build an empire through fear. My mother wanted to maintain it through strategic marriages and business alliances. He paused. "I want something that matters. Something more than just accumulating power for power's sake." "What does matter to you?" Lena shifted closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. Adrian turned to look at her, and the intensity in his silver eyes made her breath catch. "Right now? You matter. This matters. The idea that maybe I can use everything I've built to protect instead of destroy, that matters." They talked for hours, the conversation flowing from childhood memories to favorite books, to the strange liminal space they both occupied. Lena between her old life and whatever came next. Adrian between the man his father wanted him to be and the man he was trying to become. Somewhere around 2 a.m, Lena's eyes started to drift closed. She fought it, not wanting the night to end, but exhaustion won. The last thing she remembered was Adrian's hand in her hair, his voice low and soothing, saying something about rest and safety and tomorrow. She woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, Lena couldn't remember where she was. Then she registered the soft couch beneath her, the cashmere blanket someone had draped over her, the unfamiliar but expensive surroundings. Adrian's penthouse. She'd fallen asleep during their conversation. Lena sat up, smoothing her dress and trying to tame her hair. Adrian emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee, looking unfairly put together for someone who'd presumably stayed up as late as she had. "Morning," he said, handing her a mug. "I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I made it like mine. Black, 1 sugar." "That's perfect, actually." Lena took a sip, letting the warmth spread through her. "I fell asleep on you. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You needed rest." Adrian sat down beside her close enough that their knees touched. "Besides, you talk in your sleep." It was enlightening. Lena's face flushed. "I do not." "You do. You had a very strong opinion about someone named Mrs. Peterson and her terrible casserole." "Oh, no," Lena groaned. "Mrs. Peterson was my neighbor when I was 8. She kept bringing us tuna casserole that tasted like sadness and obligation. Adrian's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that made him look younger, less burdened. Sadness and obligation, that's specific. It was a specific kind of terrible. Lena set down her coffee mug. I should probably go. Let you get on with your day. Or, Adrian said carefully, you could stay for breakfast. I make excellent pancakes. Lena knew she should leave, should maintain some kind of boundary, some protection against falling too deep too fast. But sitting here in Adrian's living room, with morning sunlight turning his eyes to polished silver and the city stretched out below them like a promise, she didn't want to leave. Pancakes sound good, she said. They ate at the kitchen island, and Lena learned that Adrian was right. He did make excellent pancakes, light and fluffy with fresh blueberries and real maple syrup. They talked about nothing important, everything important, and Lena felt something settle in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. When Carter arrived to drive her home at noon, Adrian walked her to the elevator. Before the doors could close, he caught her hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for trusting me enough to fall asleep in my space, for... He stopped, seeming to search for words. For giving this a chance. Lena squeezed his hand. Thank you for cooking me dinner and not making it weird when I passed out on your couch. His smile was soft. Same time next week? It's a date, Lena said, and meant it. The elevator doors closed on Adrian's expression, something warm and hopeful and almost shy that made Lena's heart race all the way down to the parking garage. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena and Adrian fell into a new rhythm. Dinner at his place became a weekly tradition. He taught her to make risotto. She introduced him to her favorite mystery novels. They talked about everything and nothing, building something fragile and precious between them. At the Obsidian, people started to notice the change. The way Adrian's eyes softened when Lena approached his table. The way she smiled more freely, laughed more easily. The way their brief conversations at the bar stretched longer each night. Melissa cornered Lena in the break room one evening. You're sleeping with him. I'm not, Lena protested. But you want to. Melissa's expression was knowing. Honey, the sexual tension between you two could power the entire city. When are you going to do something about it? We're taking things slow. Why? Melissa asked bluntly. You're both adults. You clearly care about each other. What are you waiting for? Lena didn't have a good answer. Fear, maybe. Fear that if they crossed that line, everything would change. Fear that she'd lose herself again, the way she had with Derek. Fear that Adrian would stop seeing her as someone worth protecting and start seeing her as something he owned. But that night, when she brought Adrian his drink and their fingers brushed, when his eyes met hers with that now familiar intensity, Lena wondered if maybe Melissa was right. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid. The decision was made for her 3 nights later, when everything went sideways in the worst possible way. Lena was clearing tables near the VIP section when she heard raised voices. Not unusual at the Obsidian, business negotiations often got heated, but something about the tone made her pause. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Voss. The voice was unfamiliar, sharp with desperation. The Kozlov family doesn't forgive. They don't forget. You killed Dmitri's nephew, and now they want blood. Adrian's response was too quiet to hear, but the other man's laugh was harsh. You think your reputation will protect you? You think anyone gives a damn about your moral code when there's a price on your head? Dmitri is offering $5 million to whoever brings him proof of your death. $5 million, Voss. How many of your so-called loyal men do you think will resist that? Lena's blood went cold. She should walk away, should pretend she hadn't heard anything. But her feet carried her closer to the VIP section, close enough to see Adrian sitting calmly in his booth, his expression unreadable, while a thin man with nervous eyes paced in front of him. I appreciate the warning, Adrian said, his voice dangerously calm. But you didn't come here out of concern for my well-being. What do you want, Sergei? I want out. The man, Sergei, stopped pacing. I want you to get me and my family out of the city before Dmitri realizes I'm the one who told you. New identities, new lives, far away from this mess. And in exchange, everything I know about Dmitri's operation. His suppliers, his routes, his safe houses. Enough to bring him down before he brings you down. Lena watched Adrian consider this, his fingers steepled in front of him in that gesture she'd come to recognize as deep thought. Finally, he nodded. Carter will arrange everything. You'll be gone by morning. Sergei sagged with relief. Thank you. I know we're not friends, but we're not, Adrian agreed. But I don't let innocent people suffer if I can prevent it. Your family will be safe. Sergei left quickly, and Lena should have done the same. Should have returned to her tables and pretended she'd heard nothing. But Adrian's eyes found hers across the room, and she knew he'd known she was there the entire time. He gestured for her to approach. Lena's hands were shaking as she crossed to his booth. Is it true? Someone wants you dead? Several people want me dead, Adrian said calmly. It comes with the territory, but yes, Dmitri Kozlov is more serious than most. Because you killed his nephew. Because his nephew was trafficking children, and I made sure he couldn't anymore. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. I knew there would be consequences. I accepted them. Lena slid into the booth across from him. Propriety be damned. What happens now? Now I deal with it. How? Adrian's smile was cold. By reminding Dmitri Kozlov why people fear the Voss name. The fear that had been absent from Lena's life for weeks came roaring back, but this time it wore a different face. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was terrified for Adrian. You can't just... Lena's voice caught. Adrian, there's a $5 million bounty on your head. You need to leave the city. Go somewhere safe until this blows over. Adrian's expression didn't change. I don't run, Lena, and this won't blow over. Dmitri won't stop until one of us is dead. The only question is which one. So you're going to what? Start a war? Her hands gripped the edge of the table hard enough to hurt. Get yourself killed over pride? Not pride. Principle. Adrian leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. If I run now, every family in this city will see it as weakness. They'll move on my territory, my businesses, my people. More importantly, they'll move on you. Lena's breath stuttered. Me? You think Dmitri doesn't know about you? You think he hasn't noticed that Adrian Voss, the man who never gets attached, who keeps everyone at arm's length, suddenly has someone he cares about? Adrian's jaw tightened. The moment I show weakness, you become a target. The easiest way to hurt me is through you. The weight of that reality crashed over Lena like a physical blow. She'd known, abstractly, that being close to Adrian came with danger. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing the fear underneath his controlled exterior, made it viscerally real. Then I'll leave, she said quickly. I'll go somewhere he can't find me. You said you'd help me disappear if I wanted to. No. The word was absolute, final. Running won't protect you. Dmitri has resources across the country, connections in places you'd never think to hide. The only way to keep you safe is to end this threat completely. By killing him. Adrian didn't flinch from the accusation in her voice. If necessary. Lena stood abruptly, the booth suddenly feeling too small, too suffocating. I need air. She walked quickly toward the employee exit, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. This was what she'd signed up for, wasn't it? She'd known what Adrian was, what his world looked like. But knowing it intellectually, and facing the reality of violence and death and bounties were two completely different things. The alley behind the obsidian was cold and dark, the kind of place Lena would never have stood alone 2 months ago. But now, with Carter materializing silently from the shadows to stand watch, She felt safer here than she had in the brightly lit club. "Ms. Carter," Carter's voice was even, professional. "Are you all right?" "Does it ever get easier?" Lena asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "Living with the constant threat? Knowing that any day could be the day someone decides Adrian is worth $5 million? Carter was quiet for a moment. "No," he said finally. "But you learn to trust that Mr. Voss knows what he's doing. He's survived this long for a reason." "What reason?" "Because he's smarter than people give him credit for. Because he plans 3 moves ahead of everyone else. Because when he makes a move, it's decisive and final." Carter's silhouette shifted in the darkness. "And because now he has something worth staying alive for." Lena turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I've worked for Mr. Voss for 8 years. I've watched him build an empire, consolidate power, eliminate threats. But I've never seen him careful before. Never seen him hesitate, consider consequences beyond the immediate tactical advantage." Carter's voice softened slightly. "Until you. Now he triple-checks security. Now he worries. Now he has something to lose." The door behind them opened, and Adrian emerged into the alley. He didn't speak, just looked at Carter with a slight nod. Carter melted back into the shadows, leaving them alone. "I'm sorry," Adrian said quietly. "I shouldn't have been so blunt. I forget sometimes that not everyone is comfortable discussing death over drinks." "I'm not some delicate flower," Lena said, but her voice shook. I can't lose you. Not when I'm just starting to." She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Adrian closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You're not going to lose me," he said, and the certainty in his voice almost made her believe it. "I promise you, Lena. I've survived worse than Dmitry Kozlov, and I'll survive this too." "You can't promise that. Watch me." Adrian pressed his forehead to hers, and Lena could feel his breath warm against her skin. "I have too much to live for now. I'm not going anywhere." Lena's hands came up to grip his wrists, holding him there, holding on to this moment of quiet in the middle of chaos. "What happens now?" "Now I make arrangements. Sergei's information will help, but I need to move carefully. Dmitry has allies, people who owe him favors. If I move too fast, I'll start a war I can't control." Adrian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "But if I move too slow, he'll strike first. It's a delicate balance." "How long?" "A week. Maybe less." His expression hardened. "In the meantime, you're not leaving my sight. You'll stay at my place where security is better. Carter and his team will be with you whenever I can't be. I know it's invasive. I know it's—" "Okay," Lena interrupted. Adrian blinked. "Okay? I trust you." The words felt like surrender and strength in equal measure. "If you say staying close is safer, then I'll stay close. Just promise me you'll be careful too." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a wall crumbling behind his eyes. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made Lena's chest ache, and then stepped back. "Come on, let's get you out of here." The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension of reality. Lena moved into Adrian's penthouse with a duffel bag of essentials and the understanding that her life had fundamentally changed. She called Marcus at the Obsidian to say she needed time off for a family emergency. She ignored her phone except for the texts from Adrian and Carter updating her on their movements, and she learned what it meant to live in Adrian's world. The penthouse had security she hadn't noticed before, cameras covering every angle of approach, reinforced windows, a panic room hidden behind the master bedroom closet. Carter and 3 other men rotated shifts, always present, but never intrusive, moving through the space like well-trained ghosts. Adrian came home at odd hours, always looking exhausted, always carrying the weight of decisions Lena could only imagine. Sometimes he'd find her reading on the couch and just sit beside her in silence, his hand finding hers like an anchor. Other times he'd disappear into his office for hours, and she'd hear the low murmur of phone calls in languages she didn't understand. On the third night, Lena woke at 2 a.m. to find the bed beside her empty. She pulled on one of Adrian's shirts and padded out into the living room, where she found him standing by the windows, staring out at the city with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. Adrian didn't turn. "I'm meeting with Dimitri's representative tomorrow. Neutral ground, public place. He wants to negotiate." Lena's stomach dropped. "Is that good?" "It's a trap." Adrian's voice was flat. "Dimitri doesn't negotiate. He's going to try to kill me in broad daylight and make it look like an accident or self-defense. He'll have witnesses planted, maybe a cop or two on his payroll. It's a smart move, actually. Public enough that I can't refuse without looking weak, controlled enough that he thinks he can manipulate the outcome." "Then don't go," Lena said, crossing to stand beside him. "If you know it's a trap, I have to go. If I refuse, he'll interpret it as fear and move against me immediately. At least this way I control some of the variables." Adrian took a sip of his whiskey. "I'm bringing Carter and a full security team. We'll be armed, and I'll have my own witnesses to counter whatever story Dimitri tries to sell." "But you'll still be walking into a situation where someone wants to kill you." "Yes." Adrian finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was profound. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you agreed to have dinner with me." Lena took the whiskey glass from his hand and set it on the nearby table. Then she took both his hands in hers, holding tight. "I signed up for you," she said firmly. "All of you. The pancakes and the book recommendations, and yes, even the death threats and the security teams and the impossible choices. I'm not running, Adrian. I'm here." Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If this goes wrong tomorrow, if Dimitri succeeds, Carter has instructions to get you out of the city immediately. New identity, new life, enough money to start over anywhere you want." His voice cracked slightly. "Promise me you'll let him protect you. Promise me you won't do something stupid like try to avenge me." "Adrian, promise me, Lena." His eyes were fierce, desperate. "I need to know you'll be safe even if I'm not here to make sure of it." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say that nothing was going to happen, that he was going to come home safe, and this would all be a bad memory. But she understood what he was asking. He needed this promise to walk into Dimitri's trap with a clear head. "I promise," she whispered, "but you have to promise me something too." "Anything." "Come back to me, whatever it takes, whoever you have to become. Come back." Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. His face buried in her hair, his body trembling with tension he'd been holding back. For a long moment they just stood there, two people clinging to each other in the dark, knowing that tomorrow might shatter everything. When Adrian finally pulled back, his expression was different, determined, resolved. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "If tomorrow might be our last night, I don't want to spend it worrying." He led her back to the bedroom, and this time when they lay down, he pulled her close, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. Lena felt his heartbeat against her spine, steady and strong, and tried to memorize the feeling of safety in his embrace. "Tell me something," Adrian murmured into her hair. "Something I don't know about you." Lena thought for a moment. "When I was little, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I was obsessed with sharks. Had posters all over my room, checked out every book the library had on them." "Sharks?" She could hear the smile in his voice. "They're misunderstood," Lena said. "Everyone thinks they're these mindless killing machines, but they're actually really intelligent. They only attack when they're confused or threatened. Mostly they just want to be left alone." "Sounds familiar?" Adrian said quietly. Lena turned in his arms to face him. "You're not a shark, Adrian." "No?" His hand came up to brush hair from her face. I think I might be. Dangerous when threatened, misunderstood, just wanting to be left alone with the things I care about. The things you care about, Lena repeated. Am I one of those things? Adrian's eyes searched hers in the darkness. You're the only thing that matters, he said simply. Everything else, the business, the reputation, the empire, it's all just noise. But you're the signal that cuts through everything else. Lena kissed him then, unable to hold back any longer. It was soft and desperate and tasted like fear and hope in equal measure. Adrian responded immediately, his hand tangling in her hair, his body pressing close to hers. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were memorizing each other. Adrian's hands traced every curve of her body with reverent attention. Lena learned the scars on his skin, the old injuries he'd never explained, the map of violence written across his flesh. When they finally came together, it felt like sealing a promise that neither of them wanted to voice. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets with Adrian's arm around her, Lena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming fear of losing this, losing him, losing the future they were just starting to build. Hey, Adrian whispered, wiping away her tears. What happened to come back to me? I'm scared, Lena admitted. Me too. The confession was barely audible. But I'm also more motivated than I've ever been to survive. Because this, he gestured between them, this is worth fighting for. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and when Lena woke at dawn, Adrian was already up, getting dressed in one of his perfectly tailored suits. He moved with quiet efficiency, checking his phone, speaking in low tones with Carter, who'd appeared in the doorway. Lena watched him transform from the vulnerable man who'd held her last night into Adrian Voss, the man who commanded an empire, who made people disappear, who was about to walk into a trap with his eyes wide open. Be safe, she said when he came to kiss her goodbye. Always, he promised, and then he was gone. The next 6 hours were the longest of Lena's life. She tried to read but couldn't focus, tried to eat but had no appetite, tried to distract herself with mindless television, but every scene of violence made her heart race. Carter's replacement, a quiet man named Torres, stood sentinel by the door, his presence both reassuring and terrifying. At 2 p.m, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Lena's voice shook. Ms. Carter, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the City Police Department. I'm calling regarding Adrian Voss. There's been an incident. The world tilted sideways. Lena gripped the phone hard enough to hurt, her vision tunneling. Is he? He's alive. But there was an altercation at the meeting. Shots were fired. Mr. Voss is at City General Hospital. He's asking for you. Lena was moving before the detective finished speaking, grabbing her coat, her shoes, her keys. Torres tried to stop her. Ms. Carter, I need to verify. He's at the hospital, Lena said, her voice rising with barely controlled panic. I need to get to him now. Torres made a quick call, his expression grim, then nodded. I'll drive you, but we're taking precautions. This could be part of Dimitri's play. The drive to City General felt like it took years. Torres drove quickly but carefully, constantly checking mirrors, taking random turns that didn't make sense. When they finally pulled up to the emergency entrance, Lena was out of the car before it fully stopped. She ran through the automatic doors, up to the reception desk, her words tumbling over each other. Adrian Voss, he was brought in. There was a shooting. I need to see him. Lena. She spun around. Adrian stood in the hallway, very much alive, with a bandage on his left shoulder and blood on his shirt, but otherwise appearing unharmed. Relief hit her so hard her knees almost buckled. She crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and threw her arms around him, careful of his injured shoulder, her face pressed against his chest. You're alive. You're okay. They said shots were fired and I thought, I'm fine. Adrian's good arm came around her, holding her tight. Dimitri's men opened fire in a crowded restaurant, killed 3 bystanders, wounded 5 others. But they didn't count on me wearing a vest or having backup positioned on every exit. Lena pulled back to look at him. What happened? Dimitri's representative tried to shoot me point blank. The bullet hit my shoulder instead of my chest because Carter tackled him mid-shot. Then his backup tried to kill everyone in the room to eliminate witnesses. My team took them down. Adrian's expression was grim. It's over, Lena. Dimitri showed his hand in the worst possible way. He killed innocent people in broad daylight. Every family in the city will turn on him now. He's finished. But he's still out there, Lena said. He'll try again. No, he won't. Adrian's voice was cold, final. Because while his men were trying to kill me, my people were raiding every one of his operations. His warehouses are empty. His accounts are frozen. His allies have been shown evidence of what he did today, security footage of his men gunning down civilians. By sunset, Dmitry Kozlov will be dead or in custody, and either way, he's no longer a threat. Lena stared at him, understanding dawning. You planned this. You knew he'd try to kill you publicly, so you used it against him. I gave him the rope, Adrian confirmed. He hanged himself with it. You could have died, but I didn't. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing over her cheekbones. I told you I'd come back to you. I keep my promises. A commotion near the emergency entrance made them both turn. Police officers were rushing in, their weapons drawn, shouting orders. For a moment, Lena thought they were coming for Adrian, but they ran past him, deeper into the hospital, and Torres appeared at Adrian's elbow. They found Dmitri, Torres said quietly. Tried to flee the country. Feds picked him up at a private airfield. He'll face federal charges for the restaurant shooting plus everything else we've been building. He'll never see daylight again. Adrian's shoulders dropped fractionally, tension bleeding out of his posture. It's done then. It's done, Torres confirmed. Detective Chen approached them then, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Mr. Voss, I need your statement about what happened at the restaurant. Of course, Detective. I'm happy to cooperate. Adrian's tone was perfectly respectful, perfectly innocent. I was meeting with Mr. Kozlov's representative to discuss a potential business partnership. Without warning, his men opened fire. My security team responded to protect me and the other patrons. It was a tragedy. Chen's expression suggested she didn't believe a word of it, but she nodded. We'll need you to come to the station once the doctor clears you. Absolutely, Adrian gestured to his shoulder. As soon as they finish patching me up. Chen left with a final measuring look at both of them, and Adrian turned back to Lena. This is going to be a long day. Press conferences, police statements, damage control. You should go back to the penthouse where it's safe. No. Lena took his hand. I'm staying with you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That was the deal, remember? Adrian's smile was tired but genuine. That was the deal. They spent the next 8 hours navigating the aftermath. Adrian gave his statement to the police, his lawyers hovering nearby to ensure everything was airtight. Lena sat in the waiting room, watching news coverage of the restaurant shooting on muted televisions. The headlines called it, "A Gang War Gone Wrong," a shootout between rival criminal organizations. Adrian was mentioned as an innocent businessman caught in the crossfire, a victim rather than a participant. By the time they finally made it back to the penthouse, it was well past midnight. Adrian moved slowly, his shoulder clearly causing him pain despite the medication. Lena helped him out of his blood-stained shirt, helped him into the shower, helped him into bed. You don't have to take care of me, Adrian said, but his eyes were already closing. I know. Lena climbed into bed beside him, curling carefully against his uninjured side. But I want to. Adrian's arm came around her, holding her close. I love you, he murmured, the words barely audible. I should have said it before I left this morning, but I was afraid it would sound like goodbye. I love you, Lena Carter. You make me want to be better than I am. Lena's throat tightened with emotion. I love you too, she whispered back. Even when you scare me. Even when your world is dangerous and complicated. I love you. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two people who'd found something worth fighting for in the middle of chaos and violence and impossible odds. When Lena woke the next morning, Adrian was already awake, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing. I'm just... Adrian smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made him look younger, lighter. I'm just glad I woke up next to you. For a while there, I wasn't sure I would. Lena pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. You're stuck with me now. I hope you realize that. I'm counting on it. Adrian covered her hand with his. What do you want, Lena? Long term? Do you want to keep working at the Obsidian? Do you want to start that business we talked about? Do you want... He hesitated. Do you want a life with me, knowing what that means? Lena thought about the question carefully. A month ago, she would have said she just wanted safety, security, freedom from fear. But now, lying in Adrian's bed, with morning light streaming through the windows and the city spread out below them, she realized she wanted more. I want to build something, she said slowly. Something that matters. Maybe that cafe we talked about, or an event planning business, or... I don't know yet. But something that's mine. She met his eyes. And I want you. Not because you saved me or because you provide security, but because you see me. Because you make me want to be brave. Because when I'm with you, I feel like the best version of myself. Adrian's expression was unguarded, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. You already are the best version of yourself. I just gave you space to remember that. Then help me build something in that space, Lena said. Teach me how to navigate your world without losing myself in it. Show me how to be strong and soft at the same time. Be my partner, not my protector. I can do that. Adrian kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. I want to do that. They spent the day making plans, real plans for a future that suddenly felt possible. Lena would give her notice at the Obsidian. She'd saved enough money now to take time off, and Adrian had connections that would help her start her business. Adrian would continue running his empire, but with new rules, new boundaries. No more taking unnecessary risks. No more sacrificing everything for principle. He had something to live for now, someone to come home to. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was theirs, and that was enough. 3 months after Dmitry Kozlov's arrest, Lena stood in front of a blank storefront on the corner of 5th and Madison, keys in hand, and tried to believe this was really happening. The space was perfect. Large windows letting in natural light, exposed brick walls, high ceilings that made the room feel expansive despite its modest size. It was everything she'd imagined when she'd started dreaming about owning her own business. Second thoughts? Adrian asked from behind her. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a thin scar he wore like a badge of survival. Terror thoughts, Lena corrected, but she was smiling. What if I fail? What if nobody comes? What if I'm not ready for this? Then you'll figure it out. That's what you do. Adrian's hand found the small of her back, a gesture that had become second nature between them. You've already overcome harder things than running a cafe. Lena unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the smell of fresh paint and possibility. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of planning and paperwork and learning the impossible dance of small business ownership. Adrian had connected her with contractors, suppliers, business advisors, but he'd been careful to let her make every decision to ensure this remained hers. The cafe would open in 2 weeks. Carter's Corner, she'd named it, partly as a tribute to the man who'd protected her during her darkest days, partly because she liked the way it sounded. Cozy, welcoming, safe. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Lena admitted, running her hand along the counter that would soon hold pastries and coffee equipment. Everything is going too well. The permits came through, the contractors finished on time, the bank approved my loan. It feels like maybe you deserve good things, Adrian suggested. Like maybe the universe isn't actually conspiring against you? Something like that. Lena turned to face him. I spent so long just surviving that I don't know how to do this, how to thrive, how to be happy without waiting for it to be taken away. Adrian crossed the space between them, his hands coming to rest on her waist. You learn, one day at a time, one moment of happiness at a time, until eventually you trust that it's real. Is that what you're doing? Lena asked. Learning to trust this is real? Every day. Adrian's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way he only ever showed her. Every morning I wake up next to you and think, surely this is the day she realizes she could do better. Surely this is the day she remembers I'm not a good man. And then you roll over and smile at me, and I get another day to prove I'm worth keeping. Lena kissed him, pouring 3 months of love and trust and hard-won happiness into the gesture. When they pulled apart, Adrian was looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. There's something I need to tell you, he said, and I need you to hear me out before you react. Lena's stomach tightened. That's a terrifying way to start a conversation. I'm stepping back from the business. Adrian said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. Not completely. I still have responsibilities, people who depend on me. But I'm transitioning leadership to people I trust. Carter is taking over day-to-day operations. Marcus from the Obsidian is handling the legitimate businesses. I'm keeping oversight, but I'm removing myself from the... He paused, choosing his words carefully. From the parts that require violence. Lena stared at him. Why? Because I want a life with you that isn't defined by looking over my shoulder. Because I want to be able to sleep through the night without worrying about who's coming for me. Because... Adrian's voice dropped to something raw, honest. Because I'm tired, Lena. I've been running this empire since I was 22, and I've spent 15 years making impossible choices and living with the consequences. I want something different now. What do you want? Lena asked softly. I want to wake up next to you without wondering if it's the last time. I want to help you build this cafe and watch you succeed. I want to have dinner with you without Carter standing guard. I want... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the enormity of what he was saying. I want normal. Or as close to normal as someone like me can get. Lena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. You'd really do that? Give up everything you've built? I'm not giving it up. I'm delegating it. There's a difference. Adrian's thumb brushed across her cheek. And I'm not doing it for you, or at least not just for you. I'm doing it for me. Because for the first time in my life, I want something more than power. I want peace. When? Lena asked. The transition started 2 weeks ago. It'll take another month to finalize everything, make sure the right people are in the right positions, ensure there are no power vacuums that could destabilize things. Adrian's expression turned rueful. Turns out dismantling an empire is almost as complicated as building one. Lena laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that bordered on a sob. You're insane. You know that, right? People don't just walk away from what you've built. People who have nothing to walk toward don't, Adrian agreed. But I have you. I have the possibility of a life that doesn't revolve around violence and fear. That seems worth more than any empire. They stood in the empty cafe, holding each other while afternoon light painted shadows across the unfinished space, and Lena felt something settle in her chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of final preparations. Lena hired staff, a barista named Jamie who made art in foam, a baker named Rosa whose pastries could make people weep with joy, Two servers who understood that good customer service meant making people feel seen. She designed a menu that balanced comfort and innovation. She arranged furniture until every angle felt right. And through it all, Adrian was there. Not hovering, not controlling, but present. He helped hang artwork. He taste-tested every item on the menu and gave honest feedback. He sat in different chairs to determine which were most comfortable. He became a partner in the truest sense of the word. The night before the grand opening, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in Adrian's bed, their bed now, she'd officially moved in 2 weeks ago, and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing through everything that could go wrong. "Talk to me," Adrian murmured beside her. "I can hear you thinking from here." "What if I mess this up?" Lena whispered. "What if the coffee is bad, or the service is slow, or people come once and never return? Then you'll adjust and improve and try again." Adrian rolled onto his side to face her. "Lena, you've survived things that would have broken most people. You've rebuilt yourself from nothing. A cafe opening is nothing compared to what you've already overcome." "But what if—" "Stop." Adrian's finger pressed gently against her lips. "No more what-ifs. Tomorrow, you're going to open the doors to something you built with your own hands and your own vision. People will come. Some will love it, some won't. That's business. But none of it changes the fact that you did this. You took a dream and made it real." Lena turned into his embrace, pressing her face against his chest. "When did you become so wise?" "I've always been wise. You're just now noticing." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Sleep, love. Tomorrow is going to be a good day." And it was. Carter's Corner opened at 7 in the morning, and by 7:30 there was a line out the door. Some were curious neighbors. Some were former Obsidian clients who'd heard through the grapevine that this was Lena's place. Some were people who'd read the glowing preview in the local food blog. Lena moved through the space in a daze, pouring coffee, recommending pastries, chatting with customers who became friendlier with each interaction. Adrian sat in the corner booth, a deliberate echo of his position at the Obsidian, and watched her work with undisguised pride. Marcus from the club came by mid-morning with a bouquet of flowers and a card signed by the entire Obsidian staff. Melissa showed up during her lunch break and ordered everything on the menu, declaring each item better than the last. Even George the doorman from Lena's building appeared, beaming with grandfatherly approval. But it was the stranger who arrived just before closing who changed everything. She was in her 30s, professionally dressed, with tired eyes, and a nervous energy that Lena recognized from her own reflection months ago. She ordered a coffee and sat in the corner, and Lena watched her cry quietly into her cup for 10 minutes before approaching. "Are you okay?" Lena asked gently. The woman looked up, startled, then laughed bitterly. "No, but I will be. I finally left. After 3 years of telling myself it would get better, I finally left." She gestured to the cafe around them. "I read about this place, about how the owner used to work at the Obsidian and started over. I thought maybe if she could do it, maybe I could too." Lena's breath caught. She glanced at Adrian, who was watching from across the room with an expression that said he understood exactly what was happening. When she looked back at the woman, she made a decision. "What's your name?" Lena asked. "Sarah." "Okay, Sarah, here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish your coffee, then you're going to give me a way to contact you. And tomorrow, you and I are going to have a conversation about resources, shelters, lawyers, support groups. Whatever you need to make sure you never have to go back." Sarah's eyes widened. "You do that? For a stranger?" "Someone did it for me," Lena said simply. "Now I'm paying it forward." After Sarah left with Lena's number programmed into her phone and a promise to call tomorrow, Lena locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. The day had been exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Her feet hurt. Her voice was hoarse from talking, and she'd never been happier. Adrian appeared at her elbow with a glass of wine. "Congratulations, you survived your first day." "More than survived." Lena took the wine and sank into a chair. We made $3,000 today. 3,000! That's more than I used to make in 2 weeks at the Obsidian. And you helped someone who needed it. Adrian sat beside her. That woman, Sarah. You gave her hope. Because you gave it to me first. Lena reached for his hand. I was thinking, what if we did more of that? What if Carter's Corner became more than just a cafe? What if it was a place where women like Sarah, like I used to be, could come for help? Adrian's expression shifted to something thoughtful. You want to start a program? Not officially. Nothing that would draw attention or require paperwork. Just a safe place. Resources. Connections to people who can help. Lena squeezed his hand. You have contacts, don't you? Lawyers, counselors, people who could provide services. I do. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then smiled. I think that's a perfect use of my remaining influence, and it gives me something productive to do with the connections I'm maintaining. You're really okay with this? Lena asked. Walking away from everything you built to help me run an underground railroad for abuse survivors? I'm not walking away. I'm walking toward. Adrian pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. This is better than anything I built before. This matters. Over the following months, Carter's Corner became exactly what Lena had envisioned. During the day, it was a thriving cafe where neighbors gathered and students studied and business meetings happened over excellent coffee. But in the quiet hours, it became something more. Women with haunted eyes and desperate hope would slip in through the back door. Lena would sit with them, offer resources, make phone calls to the network Adrian had quietly assembled. Some needed legal help. Some needed shelter. Some just needed someone to believe them. Adrian coordinated everything from the shadows, using his connections to find apartments, arrange jobs, provide security when necessary. He never took credit, never asked for recognition. He just made sure that every woman who came to Lena for help got exactly what she needed. 6 months after the cafe opened, Lena was closing up late when Adrian appeared with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. What are we celebrating? She asked, wiping down the counter. We're celebrating you. Adrian poured the champagne with careful precision. Do you know how many women you've helped in the past 6 months? 27, Lena said immediately. She knew the number by heart, knew each face, each story. 27 women who are now safe because you gave them resources and hope. Adrian handed her a glass. 27 women who might have ended up like... He stopped, but they both knew what he'd been about to say. Like I almost did, Lena finished. Dead, or broken beyond repair, or still trapped in a cycle they couldn't escape. But you escaped, and now you're helping others do the same. Adrian raised his glass. To Lena Carter, who turned her pain into purpose. They drank, and Lena felt the weight of the past year settle over her. A year ago, she'd been invisible, broken, afraid. Now she stood in her own cafe, surrounded by evidence of everything she'd built, partnered with a man who'd rewritten his entire life to stand beside her. I want to ask you something, Adrian said, setting down his glass. And I need you to know there's no pressure, no expectations. Just a question. Lena's heart started racing. Okay. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I've been carrying this around for 2 months, waiting for the right moment. And then I realized every moment with you is the right moment. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the cafe's warm lighting and threw it back in fractured rainbows. I'm not good with words unless I'm threatening someone, Adrian said, and Lena laughed despite the tears already forming in her eyes. But here's what I know. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me believe in things I thought I'd lost. Hope, redemption, the possibility of happiness. And I want to spend the rest of my life watching you build beautiful things and helping where I can and just being with you. He slid off his chair and knelt in front of her, and Lena's breath stopped entirely. Lena Carter, will you marry me? The answer was immediate, absolute, so certain that Lena didn't even have to think. Yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then he was pulling her close, kissing her like she was air and he'd been drowning. When they finally pulled apart, they were both crying, both laughing, both holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in a shifting world. "I love you," Lena whispered against his lips. "I love you for saving me and for letting me save myself and for becoming someone who values peace over power. I love you for seeing past what I was to what I could be," Adrian whispered back, "for giving me a reason to change." They stood there in the empty cafe, engaged and in love, and planning a future that looked nothing like either of them had imagined a year ago. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, sirens and traffic, and a million people living their complicated lives. But inside Carter's corner, everything was quiet and safe and theirs. The wedding was small, held in the cafe on a Sunday morning, with only their closest people in attendance. Carter stood as Adrian's best man, his professional demeanor cracking just enough to show genuine happiness. Melissa was Lena's maid of honor, crying openly throughout the entire ceremony. Marcus closed the Obsidian for the day so the staff could attend. Even Catherine Voss appeared, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes softening slightly when she saw how her son looked at his bride. Lena wore a simple white dress that made her feel beautiful without trying too hard. Adrian wore a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of wonder that made him look younger, unburdened. When they exchanged vows, promising to protect and challenge and love each other through whatever came next, there wasn't a dry eye in the building. "I promise to be your partner, not your protector," Adrian said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "To trust your strength while offering mine when you need it. To build a life with you that's defined by what we create together, not what we've survived separately." "I promise to see all of you," Lena said, her hands gripping his tightly. "The darkness and the light, the empire builder, and the man who makes pancakes. To love you, not despite your past, but because of how you've chosen to move beyond it. To be brave enough to build something beautiful with you." When they kissed as husband and wife, the cafe erupted in applause, and Lena felt something shift in her chest. The last piece of fear, the last whisper of doubt that this couldn't be real, couldn't last, couldn't be hers, it dissolved completely. This was real. This was lasting. This was hers. The reception lasted well into the evening, with Rosa's special wedding cake and champagne that Adrian had imported from France and music that ranged from classical to the kind of dance songs that made everyone, even Carter, move to the rhythm. Lena danced with her husband, with Carter, with Marcus, with George the doorman, who'd become something like a grandfather to her. And when the party finally wound down and the last guest departed, Lena and Adrian stood alone in the cafe once more, surrounded by the debris of celebration. "Ready to go home?" Adrian asked, his arm around her waist. Home. The penthouse that had once been just his but was now theirs, filled with both their books and both their habits and the life they were building together. "Actually," Lena said, "I want to show you something first." She led him to the back office, where she'd been working on a project in secret for the past month. On the wall, she'd created a photo board. Not of them, though there were a few candid shots Adrian had taken when she wasn't looking, but of the women they'd helped. 27 faces, most smiling now, some still uncertain but no longer afraid. Underneath each photo was a small note. Sarah opened her own bakery. Michelle went back to school. Jennifer reconciled with her daughter. Patricia started a support group. "This is what we did," Lena said softly. "This is what you gave me the resources to do. 27 women who are living instead of just surviving." Adrian stared at the board in silence, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "My father used to say that power was about making people fear you, making sure everyone knew what happened when they crossed you." He turned to face Lena, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. But this is real power, changing lives, giving people hope, building something that matters beyond fear and violence and control. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You taught me that, Lena. You showed me what it looks like to use influence for something good. We did this together, Lena corrected. I had the vision, but you had the resources and connections to make it real. We're a team. Best team I've ever been part of, Adrian agreed. They left the cafe hand in hand, walking out into a city that no longer felt dangerous or overwhelming, but full of possibility. Carter pulled up in the car, but for once Adrian waved him off. We'll walk, he said. It's a nice night. So they walked through the city streets, Mr. and Mrs. Voss, former waitress and former crime boss, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and chose to build something light. They passed the Obsidian, where a new generation of servers were learning to be invisible. They passed Lena's old apartment building, where George was just starting his night shift. They passed the hospital where Adrian had been treated after Dimitri's attack. Every landmark was a reminder of how far they'd come, how much had changed. When they finally reached the penthouse, Adrian swept Lena into his arms and carried her across the threshold in a gesture so classically romantic it made her laugh. You're ridiculous, she said, but she was smiling. I'm traditional, Adrian corrected, setting her down gently. There's a difference. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were memorizing each other all over again. And afterward, lying tangled in sheets with the city lights painting shadows across the ceiling, Lena felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She was no longer the invisible waitress hiding bruises and flinching at raised voices. She was no longer the broken woman who'd accepted help because she had no other choice. She was Lena Voss, business owner, advocate, wife to a man who'd remade himself to be worthy of her. What are you thinking? Adrian asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. I'm thinking about how I used to dream about being invisible, Lena said. How I thought if I could just disappear, if I could just be small enough and quiet enough, maybe I'd be safe. And now? Now I know that safety doesn't come from being invisible. It comes from being seen by the right people. She turned to face him. You saw me, Adrian. When I was at my lowest, when I was trying so hard not to exist, you saw me, and you refused to look away. Best decision I ever made, Adrian said simply. Second best, Lena corrected. The best decision was choosing to change, choosing to walk away from violence and fear and build something better. Adrian pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. We built it together. Everything good in my life now. It's because you showed me there was another way. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two people who'd found salvation in the most unexpected place and had the courage to hold on to it. 3 years later, Lena stood in front of a room full of women, many of whom wore the same haunted expression she'd once seen in her own mirror. The weekly support group she'd started had grown beyond her wildest expectations. What had begun as informal conversations in the cafe's back room had evolved into a structured program with counselors, legal advocates, and resources for everything from housing to job training. I know it feels impossible right now, Lena said, her voice steady with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path and survived. I know you're scared. I know you feel trapped. I know you think there's no way out. She gestured to the room around them, the cafe she'd built, the life she'd created, the evidence of everything she'd become. But I'm standing here as proof that there is a way out, that you can survive, that you can build something beautiful from the ashes of what almost destroyed you. She looked at each woman in turn, making sure they heard her, really heard her. You are not alone. You are not invisible. You are seen, and you matter, and there are people here who will help you find your way to safety. After the meeting, as women filed out with phone numbers and resources and the fragile beginning of hope, Adrian appeared with 2 cups of coffee. Good session? He asked, handing her one. Really good. We have 3 new women starting the job training program next week. Lena took a sip, sighing contentedly. And Sarah, remember Sarah, the first woman I helped? She's opening a second location of her bakery. She wants to hire exclusively from our program. That's incredible. Adrian's pride was evident in every line of his face. You're changing the world, one woman at a time. We're changing the world, Lena corrected. I couldn't do any of this without your support. Yes, you could, Adrian said firmly. You'd find a way. That's who you are. Lena set down her coffee and moved into his arms, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the past 3 years. Do you ever miss it? The power, the empire, the fear? Adrian was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Sometimes, he admitted, there was a clarity to it. Problems had solutions, and those solutions were usually direct and final. But then I come here and see what you've built, see the lives we've changed, and I realize this is better. This is the legacy I want to leave. Speaking of legacy, Lena pulled back slightly to look at him, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. I have something to tell you. Adrian's eyes widened, understanding dawning. Are you pregnant? 8 weeks. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. I know we talked about waiting, about making sure the business was stable first, but Adrian kissed her, cutting off her explanation with a tenderness that made her chest ache. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. But nothing. This is perfect. You're perfect. We're going to have a family. His hand covered hers on her stomach. A child who'll grow up knowing they're wanted, protected, loved, who'll see their mother changing the world and their father supporting her every step of the way. You're really happy about this? Lena asked, needing to hear it one more time. I'm terrified and ecstatic in equal measure, Adrian admitted. But mostly, I'm grateful. Grateful that I get to do this with you. Grateful that I changed my life in time to be the kind of father a child deserves. They stood in the cafe, holding each other and planning for a future that kept expanding in beautiful, unexpected ways. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to their joy. But inside Carter's corner, everything was exactly as it should be. The baby, a girl they named Elena, after Lena's mother, was born on a snowy January morning. She had Adrian's gray eyes and Lena's determined expression. And from the moment she drew her first breath, she was loved with a fierceness that took both her parents' breath away. Lena took 3 months off from the cafe, and Adrian worked from home, both of them learning the impossible choreography of new parenthood. They were exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than either had imagined possible. On Elena's first birthday, they threw a party at the cafe. The same people who'd attended their wedding came to celebrate this new milestone. Carter, who'd become Uncle Carter, and took his role seriously, Melissa, who spoiled Elena shamelessly, Marcus and the Obsidian staff, the women from the support group who'd become Lena's extended family. Even Catherine Voss appeared, and while she wasn't warm exactly, she held her granddaughter with a gentleness that suggested maybe, just maybe, she was learning from her son's example. As the party wound down and guests departed with full stomachs and light hearts, Lena found Adrian standing by the photo board, which had grown significantly over the years. There were now hundreds of faces, hundreds of women who'd found their way to Carter's corner and found the help they needed to rebuild their lives. Look at what we built, Adrian said softly, Elena sleeping peacefully in his arms. Look at all these lives we've touched. Lena leaned against him, her hand resting on their daughter's back. You know what the best part is? Elena is going to grow up seeing this as normal. She's going to think it's completely ordinary to use your resources to help people, to turn pain into purpose, to choose compassion over cruelty. She's going to be extraordinary, Adrian agreed. Just like her mother. Just like both her parents, Lena corrected. You know, sometimes I think about that night at the Obsidian. When you asked me who hurt me, and I was so afraid to answer, if I'd known then where that question would lead, would you have answered differently? Adrian asked. Lena thought about it, really thought about it, about everything that had come after that night, the fear and the danger and the impossible choices, but also the love and the growth and the life they'd built together. "No," she said finally. I would have answered exactly the same, because even knowing how hard it would be, how scary and complicated and messy, I wouldn't trade this for anything. This family, this life, this purpose. It's everything I never knew I needed. Adrian kissed her temple, careful not to wake their sleeping daughter. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me, for giving me a chance to be better, for building this beautiful life with me." "Thank you for seeing me," Lena whispered back, "for refusing to look away when I needed someone most, for showing me what real strength looks like." They stood there in the cafe, the Voss family, surrounded by evidence of everything they'd overcome and everything they'd become. Outside, the city glittered with possibility. Inside, everything was warm and safe and theirs. Lena Carter had spent years trying to be invisible, trying to survive in a world that seemed determined to break her. But she'd learned something crucial along the way. Survival wasn't enough. Safety wasn't enough. She deserved more than just existing. She deserved to thrive. And now, standing in her cafe with her husband and daughter, surrounded by the lives she'd helped change and the community she'd helped build, Lena understood that she'd found something even more valuable than safety or survival. She'd found purpose. She'd found love. She'd found herself. And she'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous protection could become the most transformative salvation. Not because it saved you from harm, but because it gave you the space and strength to save yourself. Years from now, when Elena asked about how her parents met, Lena would tell her the truth. She'd tell her about being invisible and afraid, about a man who saw past the bruises to the person underneath, about choosing courage over comfort and building something beautiful from broken pieces. She'd tell her daughter that real power wasn't about making people fear you, it was about using your influence to lift others up. That real strength wasn't about never being broken, it was about healing and helping others heal. That real love wasn't about possession or protection, it was about partnership and growth and choosing each other every single day. But most importantly, she'd tell Elena that no matter how dark things seemed, no matter how impossible the situation felt, there was always a way forward. There were always people willing to help. There was always hope. Because Lena Carter, now Lena Voss, was living proof that transformation was possible, that redemption was real, that broken things could be made whole again. And as she stood in her cafe with her family, watching the sun set over the city that had once felt like a pride, she was no longer invisible. She was exactly where she was meant to be, and the world would never break her again.